The SmartFuse system consists of three parts: an implantable cage that contains electronics which is capable of stimulating and controlling bone growth, an external unit which wirelessly powers and controls the implant. It also communicates with the implant and securely transfers the data generated to our cloud solution. The data is then made available to the healthcare provider in an app.
In broad strokes, you can think of this as local drug delivery of electrical stimulation. Let's do it right where we want them.
You're going to hear from the company's executive chairman, Ben Hertzog, after we go to the video introduction.
Hundreds of thousands of patients every year don't heal properly after spine surgery because they have a failed fusion or a non-union. This causes a lifetime of pain and disability in these people and a huge burden on healthcare systems around the world.
With SmartFuse, we at Intelligent Implants are revolutionizing orthopedic with smart and connected implants. We put together a world-class team to bring SmartFuse to market. Our multidisciplinary team of 10 has backgrounds spanning from surgery to advanced implant and business development.
The SmartFuse system consists of three parts: an implantable cage that contains electronics which is capable of stimulating and controlling bone growth, an external unit which wirelessly powers and controls the implant. It also communicates with the implant and securely transfers the data generated to our cloud solution. The data is then made available to the healthcare provider in an app.
SmartFuse has been shown to reduce the risk of non-fusions. Our studies in large animals have shown 3 times more bone growth compared to controls. This will lead to better patient outcomes and quicker recoveries.
The physician's ability to remotely monitor bone growth would be a game changer.
It saves both time and money, and the patients are not exposed to ionizing radiation from CTs or X-rays during regular checkups. SmartFuse can be used with standard operating procedures and is seamlessly implemented. Our mission is to help the hundreds of thousands of patients that suffer every year from failed spinal fusion surgeries. By eliminating failed fusions, SmartFuse will contribute to save over 13 billion euros in healthcare costs. SmartFuse technology is transferable to all types of orthopedic implants, including hip implants. Our business model is to license out SmartFuse to large industry partners while we capitalize on the data generated by our connected implants.
That was a wonderful presentation, and I'd like to introduce to you Ben Hertzog, who is the executive chairman of Intelligent Implants. Ben is a medical device serial entrepreneur. Ben has spent 10 years in entrepreneurship in medical devices focused on interventional cardiology. So Ben, let me open up with a first question, and then I'll turn it over to the panelists.
All right, thank you.
Baking a cake has some basic standard ingredients: eggs, flour, yeast, and the other ingredients that make it special and different. In building a company, it might be a lot like baking a cake. You need the right ingredients mixed in the right ratios and put in the right order. Thinking about baking the cake of Intelligent Implants, tell us about what is the first most important thing you're focused on right now, and what's the next step?
I was worried about you asking hard questions about spine and orthopedics. Now we've got baking. Now I'm really worried. It's a fair question. I think, this startup thing is hard, and there are a lot of key components. And I think we spend a lot of time. I was an engineer. We spend a lot of time thinking about the technology piece of it, but it's more than that. As all of you know, you've got to have good technology. You've got to have a good unmet clinical need to address. And then you've got to have a good regulatory strategy. You've got to have a good, business strategy and understand the economics of all this. So what we're doing right now is spending a lot of our time. We're at a point early in the company where we've got great animal data, lots of large animal data. It works. We have a working prototype. We can demonstrate all of the functionality of the system. We're confident in the ability to accelerate bone growth. But now it's how do we get from here to the clinic? And so there's a lot of blocking and tackling. I like to call it the sausage making of startup, and just getting from here to an implant we can put in humans and an implant that is on the path to commercial.
Well, Ben, thank you for that answer. And let's go to our panelist, Mike Sherman.
So Ben, you've got a lot going on in this implant, from what I can tell, at least based on the website. You're stimulating and you're monitoring.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, what precisely are you monitoring?
So I think this is what is really clever. I think the therapeutic nature of this, stimulation has been around for a long time. And so in broad strokes, you can think of this as local drug delivery of electrical stimulation. Let's do it right where we want the bone. And let's do it in a way that's very controlled. So we have an 8 electrode array that allows us to steer the stimulation and really control that field. And what we've done that's really clever is we've turned around and said, well, what if we take measurements from those same electrodes? And in neurostimulation, you often take impedance measurements from the electrodes just to test the integrity of the electrode and the connection to the body. And what we found is, because of the electrical properties, the insulating properties of the mineral part of bone, that as new bone gets laid down, we can see a change in impedance. So we can measure the impedance of this local site and not only see the new bone getting laid down, but we can actually differentiate between no bone, bone graft, and mature bone. And so our hope is, and what we're seeing in animals is, over time, we can see an impedance signal that changes and goes from fresh surgery to healed bone.
Have you correlated that impedance to mineralization, to strength, to stiffness? I mean, do you have like a time, an animal study where you sacrificed over time?
We're still early, and look, I'll be honest, there's a lot to do to connect the dots between this impedance measurement and a diagnostic. So I'm not talking diagnostic yet, but I do think we've done enough work in animals and on the bench to show that the structural quality of the bone, the difference between bony bridging and bone graft, is easy to pick up in the impedance measurements. And so I am very confident over time, we'll be able to correlate that with diagnostic imaging to provide a signal that, one, has clinical relevance, two, maybe we'll get to diagnostic.
You mentioned imaging. Do the electrodes and the antenna and does the electrical array have a negative impact on diagnostic imaging, or can you manage?
We're doing CT right now, and then micro CT for doing quantification. And we're trying to minimize. We do have some titanium in there. It's mostly a PEEK frame. We have some titanium that houses, we hermetically seal the electronics in the nose. We've got some antennas, we've got some electrodes. So do we get some artifacting? Yes, but I think it's all solvable, and I think we'll get good imaging out of it.
So, excellent responses. Now let's go to Dr. Paul Anderson.
I have a couple of questions about getting FDA approval, as well as we found out with the disc arthroplasty, getting FDA approval didn't help us very much because we really needed insurance company buy-in as well. And I was just wondering what your strategy for this. You have an exemption right now, which I think means you can proceed to maybe some early clinical trials. But ultimately, is this going to require an IDE type of trial? And if so, what will be your control group, and how are you going to measure fusion? And then I had some questions. Expandable cages are getting very popular these days, especially in TLIF procedures, which is going to be a competitor to you. And I don't know if this would be available in an expandable cage. Have you thought about that?
I mean, let me say, make a blanket statement first. We see this very much as a platform technology. I don't like to use that word often, but that's how I look at this. local delivery of electrical stimulation to accelerate bone growth, and do that in a way where we can also measure the progress of that bone growth and healing. I can apply that to almost any orthopedic implant where we want to enhance bone growth. Our regulatory strategy is based on a framework that would allow us then to take this platform, prove in a trial, and yes, it would be a PMA trial to get it's an implantable electrical stimulation device, and we have this monitoring. We do a PMA trial to approve that function of the system, but we're in discussions with the FDA about a framework that allows us then to take that system, same electronics, same electrode, and apply it to different indications and different types of implants. So certainly within spine, we're going after TLIF first because of the clinical unmet need, but also because of the size of the implant. The miniaturization we have to do for a TLIF cage is then very easy to apply that same system to a larger cage where we have more volume to work with. So when I got involved, I spent a lot of time thinking about what's the cogs of this system? How much does it cost to embed electronics in an implant? And then how does that fit into the existing reimbursement paradigm? And I can tell you, one, there's a lot of work to do yet, but two, I'm quite confident that we can manufacture this implant with a cog structure that allows us to exist in the existing reimbursement paradigm for a TLIF. That being said, I think we're going to create a tremendous amount of additional value. If we can see a reduction in non-fusion rates, if we can see an increase in healing times, we also have remote monitoring so surgeons can track their patients remotely and get reimbursed for that. Thank you, COVID, for accelerating acceptance, a lot of that type of stuff. But we're creating a lot of value beyond just the intervertebral spacer.
I have a question about the electrical stimulation. Is that programmable so that if your monitoring shows things aren't proceeding, you can then make adjustment or changes, much like a pain stimulator would be, where we can modify it?
That's one of the exciting things to me, is we can start to close the loop. And this is the future of medical implants that we've been talking about for a long time, for decades. Smart implants that can provide data, that can, eventually close the loop. So my first statement is, look, in the first commercial version of this product, we're going to keep it simple. And I'm quite confident turning it on, allowing the stimulation, and then you can decide when you stop the treatment. But we can absolutely control the stimulation. We can spatially resolve the impedance measurements to see where the bone is. If you get some imbalances, yes, conceptually, you could then adjust the dose, left to right, front to back. You could also conceptually have an implant that does that on its own and makes adjustments. The regulatory hurdles for that type of stuff are pretty high. So that's something way off in the future, but that's all kind of intrinsic to this system.
So Robin, let's turn over the final set of questions before
Okay.
we go voting to you.
Thank you, Tony. Real quick. So do you need a battery?
No, it doesn't.
All right.
So one of the things we've done is wireless power transfer. So the implant itself, there's no battery.
All right. All right. So if I understand your business model, you don't make the implant, you make the implant better. So in a sense, you're making the guts of the implant and you can sell it to any other implant manufacturer. So in theory, you could sell this to every spinal implant company.
You could. And Dr. Anderson asked about expandable cages. I'll touch on that quickly. We're kind of agnostic somewhat to the implant it goes in. So if you like porous coated titanium, if you like expandable cages, conceptually, we could put the same system in all of those different types of implants.
So the other point I want to make is, this whole concept of the Internet of Things, the big revolution in our field is that the Internet of Things has now come to our field. So my question for you, and don't laugh, where's the antenna?
Embedded in the PEEK component of the implant.
All right.
It's integral to the implant.
I think you're riding a very big wave. There's a lot of other folks coming the same direction you are. And it'll be interesting to see which one of these horses, makes it across the finish line first.
I got two comments for you, Ben. And you're from the cardiovascular industry, so you're not probably thinking how manhandled these implants can be. I mean, I know Dr. Anderson.
Watch it, Mike. Watch it. Always blame the surgeon when things go wrong.
It can be
I've done that
manhandled,
many
so.
times.
I'm guilty. So you have to build some poundability into these implants. They're going to get whacked hard.
Yeah.
And so you just need to be aware of that. This is not a cardiovascular procedure.
Audience, it's going to be in your hands. And I'd like to postulate this question. The ingredients of a cake we know well, the ingredients of a business, opportunity, technology, people, and clinical evidence. Audience, will this company put those ingredients together in the right way? What do you think? From what you've heard, is this a winner and game changer? Or does this company need to go back to the drawing board? The biggest segment is promising and needs more work. And the second biggest segment is something is there, but hard to see. Well, I am not surprised with this outcome. The reason I'm not surprised is very simple, because it does need a lot more work, because it's not yet implanted in first in human. And there's a lot of opportunity between here and there. And to contact Intelligent Implants, here you go. This is how you do it. So Ben and Intelligent Implants, we wish you great success in your next steps forward.